you to go home and immediately go on Prime or something, and undoubtedly they'll be playing Mr. Ball. You can find it anywhere, so watch it tonight. So, blood, liquid connective tissue. This is this is the lab we're going to probably do next week. We'll do it over in the zoo lab. So, we know, pretty straightforward reading. Transport's everything. Regulation, you'll see it plays a role. Protection because of the immune system aspect of it. Traveling, all the things that travel in the blood do all of those things. Hormones regulate, vital substances transport, neurological elements are within the blood. So this overlaps with whoever is taking immunology. What are you doing in immunology? I'm just curious now. Oh, what's the chapter heading?
We're in chapter 4. We're doing certain
Okay. Pardon?
B cells.
So your B cells, then you're going to go into T cells.
Yes.
With plasma cells and B cells. Good. Thankfully, that's not part of this. Yeah. So, yeah, oxygen, nutrients, metabolic waste, transporting hormones. It's busy. Regulates body temperature, biggest pH buffers in your bloodstream. We have an alkaline reserve you're going to see manifesting itself in respiratory and in digestive. We utilize something called a chloride shift. Makes the hydrochloric acid in your gut, for instance. We kind of reverse the process up in the lungs. We're very clever. Fluid volume. So all of these, this is what we talk about, the clotting cascade. Thankfully, we do that. That's a lecture thing. We're not trying to make you see if your blood clots. I'd like to do it. Just give it a couple of. Dr. Dress, when he was in charge, he's not against students. I said, his students only if they deserve it. Dr. Badger, he's in trouble. Oh, we'll get in trouble. So agents of immunity are carried in the blood, as you all know. For you guys taking immunology, antibodies complement with innate proteins by blood cells, including those nefarious B cells. They all look alike. You can't tell the B cell from a T cell. Okay, this key. The terrorists. Are you a B or a T cell? And it's the only fluid tissue in the body. It's a connective tissue. As long as you got cells, as long as you have a matrix, which happens to be liquid, it's got fibers. What's the neat thing about the blood? The fibers are dissolved. There's nothing in the books to say the fibers have to be insoluble. These are soluble fibers, and the whole magic of the clotting cascade is turning those soluble fibers into insoluble fibers. Turning it from the soluble version called fibrinogen into the insoluble version called fibrin, which for all the world is like a giant fishnet whose job is to trap red blood cells. If the whole clotting cascade as simplistically as you can possibly sort of reveal it. Obviously, there's more to that. That's the intricacy of it. We get to clotting cascade and all of those kinds of things. So, classically, this is the classic. You'll see that in every anatomy and physiology textbook. It's kind of what the blood bank does. The blood bank, when you donate blood to the blood bank, if you're inclined to do so, they used to have blood drives here. Do they still have them on campus? Because I haven't seen it up here in our gym. Did they have one last term? Okay, maybe it's the day I missed it. That was because I usually walk you through that. People are trying to get me to donate blood, and they wouldn't take my blood. No, it's for true. But no, too many transfusions. I've had, you'll hear this spiel again, somewhere between 50 to 75 units of other people's blood. See, I used to have no sense of humor, not be clever. See, because you believe that. Kenzie's looked at me like this. I've had a lot of other people's blood. So I know.
Even if it isn't recent that you've had other people's blood, you still can't do it.
It's a very, I mean, also because I was exposed ages ago to hepatitis B, and I've never tested positive for hepatitis C, but every time I've tried to give blood, I was at the point where I stopped trying. They go, no, we can't take it. When I was trying to be a platelet donor with my dad back in 1988, and they said, we can't use it. Tested and said, we're sorry. Whatever I was exposed at the time, I must have had a high titer of antibodies for hepatitis B. There must be some exposure. Before hepatitis C, there was hepatitis B. I used to do all the blood draws. When my first wife worked in dialysis. At that time, on dialysis units, half were hepatitis positive, half were not. It was hep B. So every month they had their blood draws. I was a great stick. I could give you. And then I probably somehow got content. I'm thinking maybe I wasn't careful. Maybe there was, I don't recall it. We're dating this back 45 years ago. So no recall. And over the years, except she didn't wear the gloves, I drew bloods on. I drew blood and started IVs. I can't tell you how many people who likely had something nasty, hepatitis B, C, HIV. I've never tested positive for Hep C or HIV. So moving on. So effectively, what the blood bank does, it doesn't just use whole blood. It uses all the components. When you get a transfusion, all those aforementioned transfusions, all of them were something called packed red blood cells. So they spin down the blood, and they utilize all the components. Yes, a certain amount is utilized as whole blood, but most of the time is utilized not as whole blood, but as those different components. And from that pack, and we do this in the lab. It's not nearly as accurate. We have to sort of makeshift a way of spinning them down the tubes of blood. So the percent of blood volume that is red blood cells is called the hematocrit or crit. And basically, it's roughly 45% of that spinning. The heavier elements go to the bottom of the tube. The supernatant liquid, remember that term from chemistry, the liquid sits on top of your plasma. And though we don't see it in the tubes we use, which are capillary tubes, we see there's an area when you have a large enough tube where you see sort of an off-colored material between. It's called the buffy coat, because it's got like a buff or an off-white color, and that reflects the white blood cells and the platelets. So it's all by weight. The liquid's the lightest, red cells are the heaviest, the white blood cells and the platelets are in between. And so they're less than 1%, and it looks kind of like this. And because we think of that as a cylinder, because you have a unified cylinder like that, effectively, the distance in length is basically the same as volume. Okay? So if this is 1 unit, so you would measure it. So let's say this was 10 centimeters, and this was whatever X centimeters or millimeters, rather, this would be. We're able to calculate the difference. And with the beauty of that, so typically, when we use the overall distance, 55% is typical plasma, 45% on average is red blood cells. They're packed. This is negligible. We do the same thing by spinning blood in the centrifuge, and you siphon off the plasma, which can be used, and you can extract the element. You can extract the white blood cells and the platelets, and that's what I was doing for my dad. Unfortunately, they couldn't take it, not that it affected the outcome, it's just replenishing the bank of platelets. And then you have the red cells down here, and that's what we mean by packed red blood cells. It's not all red blood cells, it's not liquid, obviously, so they're still effectively a kind of liquid, but a very dense kind of liquid. That's typically what you're packed RBC. Because most time when you do a transfusion, it's for you want to restore oxygen carrying capability. When you transfuse whole blood, big accidents. Massive bleeding, major trauma, gunshot, stab, terrible auto accident. I mean, you're basically, you don't replenish everything right away. The volume and the red blood cells, that person's. So that's somebody you're not worried so much. You'll see that we utilize O-neg for that, and then, and at that point, the orders are, start 4 units of O-neg on the rapid infuser, because you gotta put it in quick, and then type and cross-match for type-specific blood on standby for the OR, let's say another 6 units. So I might have never have to have an operating room sense, other than we're building me up to have a couple of major surgeries. So that's part of it. And the other neat thing about this, that 45, you can approximate hemoglobin by dividing by 3. But normally, when we're in a hospital sense, once you have an idea that someone is anemic, or you're treating them for some degree of anemia, basically you don't have to constantly redo those tests. What you're interested in on what we call their H&H, hemoglobin and hematocrit. Those are the measures of oxygen carrying capability. So that's the only test maybe you need to do every other day, rather than have to order another complete blood count or another. And these days it's different. Again, I haven't ordered those tests. So understand nowadays it may be cheaper to do just redo. What I've seen is they keep redoing CBCs. It must be just it's all about the cause. If it's cheaper to do CBC, do a CBC. It's cheaper to get a basic metabolic panel than ordering a blood glucose here and an electrolyte panel here. Then do that. That's what they tend to do. So things have gotten less expensive, and really that's really the cost parameters are more different than what I was used to. Blood varies with the oxygen content. If you look at arterial blood versus venous blood, it's definitely different. The redness factor is there. You don't see it today because we have pulse oxers. We had no way, we didn't have the magic of pulse ox monitors. We couldn't put that little thing on your finger and tell you what the oxygen, we had to do arterial sticks. So we do a stick in the artery and we get the oxygen level. Typically do that with burn patients, trauma patients, and go from there. I learned to do that very quickly. Not so easy to do, but once you it's the old story, once you do a couple of them, you kind of get the hang of it. The same thing with starting IVs. You got to sort of bloody up a few, and then you learn what the heck you're doing. Nobody, very rarely if people are good, they just start doing it. But you can see the difference. But you can see arterial blood in major trauma is different than, first of all, pumpers. Blood will be